The following video and very existence of this channel is made possible by your support over on patreon.com/616entertainment. I couldn't do this without you, and I thank you kindly for keeping the dream alive. Want a kick-ass shirt? Head on over to prowrestlingtees.com/616entertainment and pick one up. Castlevania is one of the most famous video game franchises of all time. From vampire to vampire killers, from daring heroes to horrifying monsters, from 8 bits to 16 and everywhere in between, this series has been sending chills down our spines for nearly 40 years. When somebody mentions Dracula, 3 distinct images immediately pop into my brain: Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, and Castlevania. That's some pretty elite company to be in, if I do say so myself. On today's episode of Scream Sequence, I'm going to sink my teeth into the original Castlevania trilogy. That's the first 3 entries in the series, spanning from 1986 to 1990, all exclusive to the Nintendo Entertainment System. This franchise is not only home to some of the earliest memories of my entire life, but is, in large part, responsible for this channel existing in the first place. I can't wait to tell you these stories. Oh, what's up, Dan-Dans? My name is Ian. Welcome to another episode of Scream Sequence, razor-sharp reviews of your favorite creepy classics. It is not hyperbole in any way, shape, or form to say that this type of video, my in-depth retrospectives that you guys like so much, I would not be making videos like this were it not for Castlevania, and I'll tell you why right here at the top. Now, this is going to be a personal part about me and my work, and if you want to skip ahead to the coverage of the game, feel free to do so. You're going to miss a ton of important context and laying of the groundwork, but I know how attention spans are these days. Do whatever you want. One of my favorite entertainers in the entire world is James Rolfe, better known online as the Angry Video Game Nerd. I've been watching James for more than a decade. His AVGN reviews are not only hilarious, I've not only learned a ton from him over the years regarding the video games at hand, but my entire workflow on my retrospectives comes from Angry Video Game Nerd episode 102, where he detailed how he makes an episode of his show. He laid out the steps of playing the game and taking notes, turning those notes into a script, recording voiceovers, and I was listening. Everything I do on this channel is self-taught. I've never taken a video editing class. I've never taken an audio editing class. Look, James once called the fantastic 2002 documentary American Movie his filmmaking Bible. Well, AVGN episode 102 is mine. Why am I telling you all this about the Angry Video Game Nerd? Well, his 4-part 2009 series, Castlevania, How I Remember It, is my favorite piece of content he's ever created. It may be my favorite set of videos on the entire internet. I've watched them 100 times, and long before I made retrospectives of my own, I dreamed of one day doing a multi-part retrospective on something that I loved as much as James loves Castlevania. For more than 10 years, this channel garnered around 10 to 30 views per video. In 2017, I finally got to writing. I finally pulled the trigger on attempting to make my own multi-part retrospective. And that first retrospective was the history of SmackDown. When part 1 drew over 700 views, I couldn't believe it. That was massive for me. I kept working, I kept getting better, and in 2018, I released the history of Mortal Kombat. These 2 series alone have pulled in a combined 7 million plus views for my channel, and have become the cornerstone of what I do for a living. I get comments every day that my history of videos on Halloween or God of War or Resident Evil, people fall asleep to them. They put them on while they're at work, they throw them on while they're cleaning the house, and I respond to as many comments as I can, but nothing can really put into words how much that means to me. My videos, for several of you out there, are exactly what James' Castlevania series was and still is for me, which is unbelievable. I've been asked many times over the years to cover Castlevania in depth, and I always say I never could because I'd be too influenced by those AVGN episodes. I would never forgive myself if I accidentally, subconsciously pulled one of his lines as my own, or if my work was too similar in the end to his. But you know what? That's bogus. I'm my own man, I'm my own artist, I work in my own style, and it would be goofy to not give Castlevania my best. Now, am I as good at these games as James is? Hell no. Do I know as much about these games as James does? No. I did a ton of research to accompany my personal stories and my personal opinions, and we'll get to that in just a second. But damn it to hell, I do love these games, and when it comes to playing them, I try my best. So now the stage is set. You know how important Castlevania is to me personally and professionally. So without further ado, let's get to it. One of my favorite things to do in videos like this is to start off covering the origins of the topic at hand. I love to celebrate the writer, the director, the creator of the game or movie I'm talking about. And this is only one area where Castlevania is instantly unlike anything else I've ever covered here on the channel. Many of you may know that back in the day, back in the 80s, the video game industry was very different. There were major concerns amongst studios that their talent may be stolen away by a competitor. So Konami, the publisher of all the Castlevania titles, did not allow the developers of the game to take credit for their work. Trans Fishers did not direct the original Castlevania, nor did Bram Stoker write it, nor did Christopher B. star as Dracula. These names, which are obviously humorous odes to many of the greats of the horror genre, are here in place of the actual developers of the game. Konami were very canny back in the day, not only in protecting their investment in these talented designers, but in circumventing Nintendo's production protocol as well. After the video game crash of the Atari 2600 era, Nintendo avoided the market being flooded by trash with the rule that every publisher, even the best and brightest, were allowed to release just 5 games per year. All NES cartridges were produced by Nintendo themselves, each granted the official Nintendo seal of quality. Konami, the hard-working and successful publisher and developer they were, said, "That doesn't work for me, brother." What do Metal Gear, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Skate or Die, Gyrus, and more have in common? They're all Konami games. The logo on the box says Ultra Games, and guess what? Ultra Games was Konami's shell company they created literally just to get around the 5 games per year rule. I don't like the developers not being allowed to take credit for their work, but I do love the creation of Ultra Games. That's good stuff. When it comes to who really created Castlevania, who put in their blood, sweat, and tears on this project, it's been almost 40 years and we still don't have a concrete, complete rundown. We do know that this entire trilogy we're covering here today was written and directed by Hitoshi Akamatsu, but even he is a pretty big question mark. Mr. Akamatsu directed Castlevania, Castlevania 2, and Castlevania 3. That's a hell of a resume. He must have gone on to create other, bigger, better games after this, right? Not really. Shortly after the North American release of Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse in 1990, he retired from the video game industry altogether and has been a complete ghost ever since. I'm serious. No one can find him. What you're looking at is the only known photograph of Hitoshi Akamatsu in existence. There are members of the Castlevania fanbase that wonder if Hitoshi Akamatsu ever even existed. They wonder if the very name itself is another secretive pseudonym, which I doubt. Man, what a miserable little pile of secrets. Let's dive into the story and gameplay. You know, these days, we've got the lore. We've got the history of all these games spelled out in great detail, but back in the early 90s, when my brother and I had an NES and we owned Castlevania, we didn't know we were playing as Simon Belmont. We didn't know that Simon's weapon, his whip, was called the Vampire Killer. We didn't know anything that wasn't printed on the back of the box or in the instruction manual. And spoilers, none of those deep, fleshed out details of the lore you can find online are anywhere to be found on either of the things I just mentioned. Plus, I was playing Castlevania before I could even read. I was born in 1990. We got an NES when I was probably 3 years old. This box could have said Dracula is a bad man with sharp teeth and he'll steal your candy if you don't clean your room, and I wouldn't have known the difference anyway. I can recall things I did take note of, though. Castlevania always felt like a special kind of adventure to me. Now, at that age, obviously I wouldn't have been able to find these words, but what I was noticing back then was how cinematic this game is. And I'm not talking about the bosses, which are pulled straight from the classic Universal monster movies. I'm talking about the camera panning from room to room. I'm talking about seeing Dracula's castle in the background as we approach it. I'm talking about the moon growing exponentially in size as we progress to our end goal. The castle crumbling after the final battle is one of the earliest examples of cutscenes in a video game. And I mean, come on, look at the main menu. The top and bottom of the screen, we're looking at a strip of film. Now that's a little background on the game's creation, or it's as much information as I can find about the game's creation on the internet. I've got more Castlevania stories to tell, I've got more deep dive in Castlevania details to share, but before we dive into any of that, I do want to shine a light on the gameplay itself. The Vampire Killer, as it's known today, or the Magic Whip, as the instruction booklet calls it, is our main weapon. We can upgrade it by grabbing power-ups, making the whip longer and more dangerous. Throwable sub-weapons are also hidden in the environment. Daggers, axes, holy water, the cross, boomerang. Some say each weapon has a specific use case. The holy water is the best weapon in the game for my money, and the dagger sucks. I would pretty much rather have nothing than to have the dagger. When we're badly hurt, we need to find some meat, as it's the only way to replenish our health. There are no kitchens or refrigerators to be found, though. No. The meat is hidden in the bricks that make up the walls. Don't ask questions, just eat it. I love the little hidden secrets in this game. Check it out. Break this block on stage 2 and kneel at the bottom of the screen. Break the blocks on stage 4 and stand inside the wall. Neither of these items do much other than improve your score, which is largely pointless, but I grab them on every playthrough. It doesn't feel complete unless I get them.
Also, I didn't even write about this. This is just my natural behavior from the gameplay I captured. I love jumping in front of the HUD. I love jumping in front of the scoreboard up there. I can't stop doing it. Awesome little tricks from back in the day, right? No meat there.
Across Castlevania's 18 stages, we're faced with half a dozen big boss fights. The Mummy Men, as they're called, may not be one-to-one recreations of Lon Chaney Jr.'s Karis, but it's damn close. The Frankenstein and Igor boss doesn't even need to be explained, does it? That is straight up Boris Karloff's rendition of the Frankenstein monster. In Death, we've got our classic Grim Reaper, and oh boy, let me tell you, if you're not fully equipped with an upgraded whip, tons of hearts, and a sub-weapon, you're not going to win this fight. Yes, I know that there are really talented speedrunners out there, and even normal players out there, who can do this with just the whip, but I certainly can't. Just getting into the position where I could spam him with the holy water took me forever. And that's the thing, Castlevania is a hard game. Very hard. I've been playing it for 30 years, and I still hit brick walls where I'm like, yeah, this is just not gonna happen today. There's a timer counting down on each level, but it'll never run out. You'll fall in a pit or have your health bar drained 1,000 times on your trek to Dracula, but the timer, it may as well not even be there, which is nice. Timers can be very stressful, and we've got enough stressing us already in a game this difficult, so I'll take any little victory I can get. Some of you hardcores out there might be wondering if I'm going to cover Vampire Killer, the similar but different game that was released exclusively in Japan for the MSX2. The short answer to this question is no. I'm not going to be covering it at all. I really don't know anything about Vampire Killer. I've never played it, And I'm not going to stand here and make stuff up. That's not my style. Plus, we've got an entire trilogy to cover here today. Let's not get crazy. At the end of the game, Dracula's head is severed from his body. He explodes, and the curse of man is revealed. Anybody who tells you this fight is easy is a liar. Even with a sound strategy and a fully prepared loadout, it's insanely difficult for me. But when it's all said and done, the evil is vanquished, and we watch the satanic castle crumble to dust. Oh yeah, in Japan, this game isn't called Castlevania. It's called Dracula's Satanic Castle, which is awesome. That name did not fly in the States due to Konami of America's senior vice president, who was not on board with the religious terms and iconography, and so Castlevania was born. One of the coolest little details I learned in my research is that, according to the designers, the gears present in the final levels are powered by Dracula's heartbeat. When Dracula is killed at the end of the game, the castle crumbles, because there's nothing left to keep everything moving. There's nothing to keep it all together. We can bust on 2D side-scrollers from this era all we want regarding floating platforms and staircases to nowhere and all that silly stuff, but I love when there is an actual explanation for what we are seeing. Upon its 1986 Japanese and 1987 American release, Castlevania made a hell of a name for itself. I owned Castlevania, my friends owned Castlevania, it reviewed very well, and as a young kid, to me, it always felt like this game was one of the biggest, most well-known games in the entire NES library. But factually, when it comes to dollars and cents, it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Castlevania doesn't break into the top 75 when it comes to the best-selling NES games of all time. And I don't mean this 1987 debut original, I mean none of the 3 games on the docket today crack into that list, believe it or not. The fact that we're still talking about it today, the fact that these games are still being re-released today despite not setting the sales world on fire, is just a testament to its quality. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Let's not jump to present day just yet. Just like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and any other classic horror icon, Dracula's never really dead. In November of 1988 here in the States, it was time for terror once again in Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Now what the hell is Simon's Quest exactly? What is our hero setting out to accomplish? Well, this one's a doozy. At the end of the first game, we cut Dracula's head clean off his shoulders. We defeat his gigantic, monstrous form, which explodes. From a design standpoint, Dracula's body parts flying in every direction wasn't just a cool thing to do. It was planting the seeds for the sequel. A curse was placed on Simon after the battle, and to gain his freedom, he must track down all of the severed limbs and lay them to rest in the ruins of the original castle. That is awesome. Back in the late 80s, some developers seemingly loved to completely change the playstyles between entries of certain franchises. One of the most famous cases of this is The Legend of Zelda, a top-down action-adventure game, and its sequel, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Imagine playing the original and then going to the video store and renting Zelda 2, only to pop it in your NES and have no idea what you're looking at. Arguably the second most well-known case of this genre switch is, you guessed it, Castlevania to Castlevania 2. Now these two games don't immediately look different the way Zelda and Zelda 2 do, but the play styles are night and day, and I mean that literally in the case of Simon's Quest. Castlevania 2 now has us purchasing new weapons and upgrades for our existing arsenal, but we're not spending money, we're spending hearts for whatever reason. We're walking around towns populated with other people and having conversations with them. The night and day deal I mentioned earlier comes into play right here. When night falls, the enemies are tougher, townspeople are replaced with zombies, so on and so forth. When I was a kid, I was lucky enough to own both Castlevania and Castlevania 2, but I really don't have any memories of playing Castlevania 2 from when I was that age. And it's probably because it was too hard. It was probably too intimidating for me to figure out. You know, with the original game, it's pretty clear. You turn it on, we gotta get from point A to point B. There are enemies in the way, we gotta kill them, there's going to be a boss fight. It's pretty straightforward. In Castlevania 2, being able to speak to the townspeople and trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about, having multiple paths open to us from the very start and trying to figure out which one we're supposed to go down first, I mean, I was probably super overwhelmed. Full disclosure, to this day, I have never beaten Castlevania 2. I've never even come close. And that's not because Castlevania 2 is much harder than the original. It's not that I've tried a million times and failed. I just don't really have a lot of interest in spending a lot of time with this game. It's just not for me. I've never felt bad about being such a noob when it comes to Simon's Quest because, I mean, let's face it, the game is designed to be confusing. It's not designed to test your skill or your cunning or your reflexes as much as it's designed to confuse you. I'm serious. You are not going to figure out where to go or what to do in Castlevania 2 without the aid of a guide. Let's not even talk about the crystal that brings a tornado to carry you away, or the crystal that you hold to kneel and drop the screen down, revealing more of a level. Let's cover the townspeople themselves. You depend on these characters to tell you what to do and where to go. And guess what? Many of them will tell you things that are not true. There's been debate for decades whether something was lost in translation, whether this was poor design or whether it was on purpose, but longtime Castlevania veteran Koji Igarashi claims that some of these people were placed here specifically to lie to you. So, thanks for that, I guess. It goes without saying that the music in the Castlevania series, across the board, is top tier. 10 out of 10. But Castlevania 2 specifically, oh my goodness. Several of the greatest songs in video game history come from right here. Kenichi Matsubara composed the music for Simon's Quest, and let me tell you something, Bloody Tears belongs in the Hall of Fame. For the rest of time, Bloody Tears would make appearances in sequel after sequel, establishing itself, in some ways, as the overall theme song of the entire franchise. This second entry is remembered fondly by some, and not so fondly by others. Some people hate this game. The angry video game nerd's entire gimmick kicked off with him trashing this one to pieces. Now, he's made it clear that his hatred for the game is definitely dialed up for the sake of entertainment, of course, but you get the picture. So, just once and for all, how do I personally feel about Castlevania 2? Not a fan. Even today, in my 30s, I gave it another go in preparation for this video, and I still have no idea what to do. I still have no idea where to go. You know, I started in the first town and I trekked all the way somewhere else and I got lost. So I read online. There was a specific merchant that was supposed to be in a specific building and I have to buy a specific item from them. I walked into the building. There's no merchant. So I did a little further reading, and what do I find out? I have to go back to the original town to buy the holy water. It was specifically the holy water. Go all the way back to where I just was, throw the holy water at the wall inside the building where the merchant was supposed to be. That wall will disappear. I can then walk into the wall where there's an entirely different room with the merchant that I thought I was going to find in the first place. How am I supposed to know how to do that? How is anyone supposed to know to do that? Do they expect you to pick the holy water up, keep it equipped, and just throw it at everything you see? I don't think so. I don't think so. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, despite its unique design choices and largely lackluster boss fights, reviewed fairly well. The game sold nearly 1 million units, and even after the final battle, even after the smoke was cleared and Simon Belmont laid Dracula's body to rest, the story was far from over. Dracula's arm bursts out from the grave and, depending on your ending, yes, there are multiple endings, Simon Belmont either lives or dies. I'll never see the different endings myself because I'm not interested in playing all the way through this game, but that's alright. If you're watching this video and you're a fan of Simon's Quest, tell me a story in the comments. Tell me about a great memory you have with this game. I'd love to read it. In between Simon's Quest and the third mainline entry, Haunted Castle would hit arcades. Players would once again take control of Simon Belmont on a death-defying journey to save his wife from Dracula, but we're not here today to focus on Haunted Castle, nor are we going to spend much time on Castlevania The Adventure, which was exclusive to the Game Boy. I will say though, this game rules, and is one of my favorite games on the platform. But I advertised this episode of Scream Sequence as one covering the NES trilogy of Castlevania games, and damn it, it's time for the main event. In September of 1990, that's 2 months before I was born for anyone keeping score, the NES once again played host to another vampiric adventure. Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, returned the series to its roots, leaving behind the RPG and open world elements of Simon's Quest. But this wasn't a carbon copy of the original, no. There were new innovations in the shape of branching paths and multiple playable characters, making each run feel fresh. The 3 partners we can recruit on the journey are the Sorceress Sypha, the Pirate Grant, and Alucard, the son of Dracula. Each character has their own unique abilities, meaning your choice of who to bring along for the ride can make a gigantic difference. But hold on, I got ahead of myself again. You may wonder what the hell is going on here. It'd be nice if I laid it out for you, right? Well, Castlevania 3 is a prequel, and for the first time we've got an actual story laid out for us in the game. Dracula's been wreaking havoc for eons, the Belmont family were exiled from society over fear of their abilities, and somebody's gotta get this mess under control. Simon Belmont, the star of Castlevania and Castlevania 2, doesn't even exist yet. We're playing as his ancestor, Trevor Belmont. You know, some families are comprised of generations of bakers or accountants or dentists. Other families are vampire hunters. What are you gonna do? You're probably tired of hearing this by now, but I did state earlier that Castlevania 2 is not for me. I'm not a fan of Simon's Quest. But Castlevania 3? Dude, Castlevania 3 is awesome. If you've ever played Simon's Quest and Dracula's Curse back to back, you know what I'm talking about when I say that Castlevania 3 just feels better in every way. The platforming is smoother, the whip feels better, and just going back to the original style of whip upgrades and the classic sub-weapons we can pick up from candles or defeated enemies, this is what I want to be doing when I play Castlevania. The boss fights are drastically improved, and yes, we're taking on the Universal monsters once again in the mummies and Frankenstein, but that's not all. These skeletal knight dudes remind me of Jason and the Argonauts. This big demon boy is just fantastic. The fight with death isn't just a minefield of flying scythes this time. Now he's got a second phase where he takes the form of an enormous freaky ass face. One boss fight matches us up against a mirror image of ourselves, or whichever character we're playing as. Castlevania 3 is basically the original game just leveled up. Bigger, better, and just awesome. I mean, this is what Castlevania 2 should have been, but hey, what are you gonna do? Dracula's Curse contains arguably the toughest platforming of the entire NES trilogy, but I feel like the difficulty ramps up over time. The first few stages are practically a breeze. You'll feel good. You'll feel like this is just going to be a walk in the park. And then the game reminds you what Castlevania is all about. And let me just be clear with you. I've still never beaten Castlevania 3. I will, someday, but in my 32 years on this planet, I've yet to pull it off. But I don't have to finish it to tell you that good lord, this game looks incredible. And I'm not alone in thinking that this is one of the best looking offerings on the entire platform. And you know what? It's got one of the best soundtracks on the platform as well. What's really interesting to me is that the Japanese release of Castlevania 3, the soundtrack sounds totally different. And that's because inside the Famicom, which is what the NES was called in Japan, there's a different sound chip. And this sound chip allowed for deeper, richer sounds and music. This video from Kid Gabula beautifully illustrates the difference in sound quality. Both sound great. It's not like the version we got over here is horrible or anything. It's just the Japanese version is deeper and richer. Look, I'm not a musician. I don't want to get deep into the weeds and talking about music and composition because I really don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I would rather spend some time covering the legacy that this game has left behind. The aforementioned Koji Igarashi, the writer and assistant director on many Castlevania titles, most notably Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation, has called Dracula's Curse his favorite in the entire franchise. And I mean, it shows. Iga's own studio, Artplay, which he founded after leaving Konami in 2014, is most well known for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a love letter and spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night. Ritual of the Night is awesome, but Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is even better. This 8-bit blast from the past is so inspired by Castlevania 3, it's almost surprising they got away with it. And I'm not complaining. Curse of the Moon is fantastic. So is Curse of the Moon 2, by the way. These games are on every modern console out there, and they're cheap, so don't skip these. If you've seen the Castlevania animated series on Netflix, you might know that this show's storyline is pulled straight from Dracula's Curse. I was just talking about how this game's graphics are some of the best in the entire NES library. Same deal with the soundtrack, but I'm ready to throw down the gauntlet now. Castlevania 3 is one of the best games on the NES, full stop. And once again, I'm not alone in that opinion. In their top 100 NES games of all time list, IGN slots Castlevania at 19, Castlevania 2 at 25, and Castlevania 3 at number 5 of all time. Look at some of the games on the NES, even some of the better known games. How many of them are we still talking about with such reverence today? Not too many. Castlevania has stood the test of time, Dan. What's funny is that, with as much as I love the original and Dracula's Curse, they're not my favorites in the series. I adore Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis, which sold very poorly and is not nearly as well known as the NES games, despite its high quality. Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES is legendary. I did a video review on it over 5 years ago on this channel. It was just the second review I'd ever done. I'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out. And dude, Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation? Forget about it. These are my favorites. These are the Castlevania games that I know best. And if this video does well and you guys want to see me cover those in depth someday, hey, I'd be happy to. After all, Castlevania is where some of my earliest memories come from. Castlevania is partially responsible for me making videos like this and doing what I do for a living. I hope I've done the series proud here today. And if you're a fan of the games, I hope I've done you proud as well. Oh, there it is. That's my Scream Sequence retrospective on the Castlevania Trilogy, exclusive to the Nintendo Entertainment System. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because it was a long time coming. Join me next time for a Scream Sequence retrospective on the 1931 classic. They call it the original horror show. It's the man who made a monster Frankenstein. Dan, thank you so much for watching, but let me be real for a second. This show is not doing the numbers that I thought it would. The Child's Play episode performed softly in comparison to what I was expecting. The Silent Hill retrospective was a total bomb, and the episode on the Resident Evil movie performed even worse. Now, it's very important to me to continue expanding into other genres. I don't just want to be the Mortal Kombat and wrestling guy, but good lord, I thought this show would do better. Now, I'm going to keep making episodes of Scream Sequence, don't worry. I'm going to keep making them for multiple reasons. Number one, this was a Patreon goal, and I promised a full season if we hit that goal, and you guys helped me hit that goal, and I don't go back on my promises. Number two, I just like making this show. This is one of my favorite things that I do, and I know those of you who do watch this show also enjoy it, so thank you very much. But I have to grow this channel if I'm going to continue to make in-depth retrospectives like this. It's not that I want to, although I do want to. I have to. So, if you are already signed up over on patreon.com/616entertainment, you are helping keep the 616 lights on over here. And if you like this video and you want to see more like it and you're not signed up, please consider signing up at any level you choose. There are all kinds of exclusive goodies over there. There are plenty more on the way, but at the end of the day, you are also just helping make videos like this. All of the producers at the beginning and the ending of every video, nobody has any idea how important that is to keeping this channel alive. And I'm being serious when I say that. With that said, as the one-man crew behind all of these videos, thank you very much for supporting me. Thank you very much for watching videos like this, and I can't wait to drop the next one on you very, very soon. Until then, I love ya, and I'll see you next time.